And we have our second keynote speaker of the day. Aamer Baig leads McKinsey's work in technology globally and McKinsey's digital and AI practice in North America. He serves the C-suite across industries to drive performance and growth, transforming their technological capabilities. He has written and spoken extensively about the criticality of the CIO role in enabling a safe, scalable, and value-added adoption of AI in the enterprise. Last year, he spoke to us about the importance of addressing tech debt in your modernization programs. And this year, he will be speaking to us about the early lessons from GenAI adoption in the enterprise. Please welcome Aamer Baig.
Thank you, Alan, for that very kind introduction. It's one of the favorite events of the year to come here to see a great convening of CIOs, focusing on issues in the present and around the corner. It is with that frame in mind that I will be speaking about the early lessons in GenAI adoption. We call it the 7 hard truths to get from pilot to scale. Without getting into it, let me just say that I'm actually a believer in the possibilities of generative AI. We've written about this and have done tons of client work where we're really seeing the potential to transform and reimagine a variety of businesses, as well as reimagine the technology function in a way that it has never been before. But there are a number of issues to solve before you go from pilot to scale, as we say here. So with that, let me begin. And it's important to just set the frame and say, we see the honeymoon phase being over. Before we start about what happens next and speak about that, it's important to reflect on how this relationship actually started. Perhaps like many great relationships, it started with a lot of intensity, belief in inevitability, validation from a lot of opinion shapers around us, Wall Street, B2C companies, tech providers, and even some governments. And then we started experimenting, exploring with chatbots. We started having fun with synthesis, content generation, and then started applying this to real-world business problems. And that's where we're seeing some sputtering. The result, in our global survey of AI that McKinsey does, we found only 10% of companies that have said they have achieved and implemented GenAI at scale in any use case. 10%, right? So that is the focus of this discussion. How do we go from where we are to what can be really transformational in your businesses and in your companies? So that is why we took the frame of truth. Let's look at the 7 truths. As all relationships are based on truth, let's set those truths up and let's figure out some solutions to them so we can get to scale and real business impact. The first hard truth is that all of us probably have a lot more generative AI projects going on that are actually driving impact. We call it cut the noise, keep the signal, because it's time to focus. In many organizations, you have a plethora of GenAI initiatives. In fact, but we're also finding out that not all of them are generating bottom line impact. In our survey that I referenced earlier, we're finding that only 15% of companies we surveyed are experiencing or have line of sight into seeing any earnings improvement from GenAI initiatives. Just 15%, all right? So when we go into an organization, we've done tons of this, and we look at all the things that are going on, the plot of generative AI initiatives looks sort of like this matrix. and it happens over and over again. If you plot your generative AI initiatives on a value versus feasibility matrix, find a lot more things that out there that don't actually add value. Okay? So what do? This is, we believe, one of the most important roles a CIO can play is to get the organization to focus on initiatives that'll drive real business value, which is solve a critical business problem that is technologically feasible and has manageable risk. That is one of the most important things they can do. The second important truth here is to focus on the entire technology stack or the technology architecture, not just the models, and specifically not just the LLMs. All right? It requires an effort on how all of this ecosystem components fit together. And even a simple generative AI solution requires about 20 to 30 elements that you have to put together. It is not just the LLM, the models, or the gateway. That's where you get started. That's on the lower right-hand side of this page. We usually get started with that, pick the LLM, put a gateway in front of it, and then you have to find out that you need the right data, you need to put the right security on it. Then you find out that you need some new capabilities and elements like, hey, how do we handle prompt engineering? How do we handle memory, right? How do we integrate IP and controls into it? This is about putting the whole piece, a jigsaw puzzle together, not just one piece, and figuring out how all that works. The sum of the parts should be greater than each part individually, or the sum of the whole, or the whole should be greater than the sum of the parts, rather. And then when you do put it together, we find that automation and orchestration becomes really important. We see a lot of effort being focused on business workflows being automated, but not enough on technical workflows. Given the pace of change, this is where you have to invest in getting, as they say, the cobbler's children their own shoes. So we have to focus on automation of the technical workflows as well. If it has to work like clockwork, everything has to be automated, or at least most parts do. In fact, when we looked at successful generative AI initiatives, there was at least partial automation of some of the technical workflows, like model testing and validation. And when you don't invest in that, you don't actually get the benefits. The third hard truth is around cost. We all grew up with certain orthodoxies around how cost is estimated in technology-driven projects and programs. And we're finding that a lot of those orthodoxies are not turning out to be true with generative AI. The reason is it's actually much easier and less costly to get going. So the low upfront costs, sometimes belie an actual problem. Low upfront costs, high need for change management, as was covered in the panel earlier, and high compute intensity generates a very, very different cost profile. So what are the changes that we see? So in change management, we can't stress this enough. A few years ago, we made quite a splash by saying, you need to budget as much for change management as you do for development. That itself was a pivot when we looked at digital transformations. Now we're finding as much as 3 times as much need for investment in change management as it is for the actual development. This is why. Why is that? Because you need the same things you did before, like changes in workflows, changes in business processes, changes in policy, new KPIs, but also new elements that are now in the mix, like prompt engineering, hallucination training, control of IP, risk. All that requires an effort up front. Your run costs. I grew up in tech with a rule of thumb that, hey, for every tech project, 15 to 30% on the high end, you have to budget for ongoing maintenance and evolution of an app or a system that you have. With GenAI, I humbly suggest you throw that out the window. Sometimes this is ending up being as the maintenance and run ends up costing as much as the build every year. All right? Obviously, this varies by type of use case, but that's what we've seen. And then the third element, which is also a surprise, I personally have been a very strong believer in the power of great technical choices, a very strong business case, making the right decisions technologically and from a business model standpoint that can drive huge swings in your cost as well as the business case overall in terms of impact. And I used to say this is as much as a 1 to 5x difference. The right decisions could end up costing you 5x more. If you pick the wrong platform, if you don't automate in the right places, or you automate too much, you don't focus on policy as much as you focus on tech, it's turning out to be more like 10 or 20x in some instances. So the big decisions up front really, really matter. Now, the good thing is, in this world, some of these decisions can be unwound. So the big message here is don't get snuck in by a very easy upfront business case, implementation case, because the overall business case is actually more complicated. Now, the fourth hard truth is taming of proliferation of tools and technologies. We talked about use case proliferation. We have platform proliferation as well. In fact, in our survey, one of the top obstacles that was cited to achieving generative AI at scale was actually too many technology platforms. It wasn't the use case, it wasn't data availability, it wasn't path to value, it was actually tech platforms. You guys have lived through it before with cloud and SaaS. It's the same problem, and the solutions are similar. You have to figure out where you standardize and focus on productivity of your teams, right? Some of these tools really don't make that much of a difference. The fifth one is around the team and the composition of the team and the governance around them. We have found too many skunkworks initiatives being driven by a few talented people in organizations. To get it right, we have to apply the same learnings we've had before, which is to work in a product-oriented model we call the product pod with an integrated team. But that's not sufficient. We need to be building a platform that's also a persistent team that has also a mix of people that develops a GenAI platform or your AI platforms that scale. But then you need the scaffolding from the company to actually make sure that both the product and platform teams are organized and focused and working at pace. And of course, it needs the visibility of top management to be successful. The sixth, not surprisingly, is about data. Data is a huge and daunting challenge for many, many organizations. In fact, some of you probably have data programs that will outlast your own tenure in the organization. They'll just never be done. That's okay. But we have to get started somehow. Many organizations are taking a top-down look at the data and saying, hey, what are the use cases? What data do we need? And what's high priority? And how do I solve it? And that ends up looking like a massive spreadsheet that looks like this. All right? If you want to solve this, you'll actually never get done, and it definitely won't get done in any reasonable management time horizon. So what do we do? Again, a simple lesson we've learned is to actually focus on data that helps you with multiple use cases. And that usually ends up being 3 or 4 domains in most companies that you can actually get started on and apply it to your high priority business case, business challenges with business buy-in and deliver something that actually gets to production and scale. Right? don't boil the ocean. And then finally, the seventh hard truth is around reuse. Many of us who grew up as engineers or leading engineering teams know the value of reuse. It actually accelerates your time to impact. We have so much proliferation and then so many initiatives going on, sometimes that's difficult to do. As I mentioned earlier, even a simple GenAI initiative has 20 to 30 elements or components, right? That's just to put things together. But when we looked at it and we looked at hundreds and hundreds of initiatives, there are about half or two-thirds of these components that can actually be reused. And the benefit is 30 to 50% of acceleration in your delivery speed. So reuse directly translates to delivery speed, keeping your businesses happy, and delivering impact. This itself can close a business case, folks. So this is the seventh truth. Now, as we step back and we say, what are the 7 hard truths to move past the honeymoon phase? Here it is all together. Focus on the signal. Focus on how the pieces fit together. Build a really good business case and keep an eye on the cost. Tame the proliferation. Assemble the minds that you need with the right governance. Get the right data, and then reuse it or lose it. As any relationship needs truth to thrive, we hope that these 7 hard truths help you with that, and the benefits will be rewarding. And what are the rewards? Our research says the value of generative AI is as much as $4.4 trillion in economic impact. There's value to doing it well, doing it quickly, but making sure you're doing it safely and at scale. And we believe these are the 7 things that we've learned in the last year that will allow you to go from pilot to scale. Now, one final note, and we'll be done after that. Unlike other digital disruptions where incumbent companies were attacked by disruptors and startups, I believe in the phase of AI, and particularly generative AI, it is the established companies that hold a massive advantage because of the level of investment that's needed and the level of understanding that you need of your own data. So you have an incredible opportunity to really take advantage of this, and that makes it even more important for people in this audience, the CIOs, CTOs, and the CDIOs, to play a leading role in leading your organizations forward on this journey. With that, I conclude and invite any of you that want to have any questions. I'll be available later. Take care. Thank you.